The entire crowd fell silent when the billionaire made her offer. $2 million. Not for buying the car. Not for selling it. But for anyone who could make it start. The bright yellow Lamborghini sat motionless in the center of the massive warehouse like a forgotten king. Its paint still gleamed under the lights, but beneath that beauty was a machine that had refused to breathe for nearly 7 years. Dozens of elite engineers had failed. Luxury car specialists had failed. Factory-trained technicians had failed. Yet standing near the back of the crowd was a mechanic wearing oil-stained work boots and a faded blue work shirt. When he finally stepped forward, everyone expected him to ask questions. Instead, he quietly said he needed a $9 fuse. Laughter instantly spread across the room. Nobody knew that within the next hour, lives would change forever. If you believe kindness, honesty, and second chances still matter in this world, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs inspiration, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories that remind us what truly matters. The billionaire's name was Victoria Sterling. At 38 years old, she had built one of the largest technology companies in America. Business magazines called her brilliant. Investors called her fearless. But none of those titles mattered to her anymore. Because she would have traded every dollar she owned for one more day with her father. Her father, Richard Sterling, had started life with absolutely nothing. He grew up in a tiny house where rain leaked through the roof every winter. He worked odd jobs before sunrise and after sunset. He sacrificed every comfort imaginable so his daughter could have opportunities he never had. When Victoria was 10 years old, her father made a promise. One day, he told her, they would escape poverty together. Years later, after decades of hard work, Richard achieved something he once considered impossible. He bought his dream car. A Lamborghini. It wasn't simply a luxury vehicle. It was proof that every sacrifice had meant something. Proof that impossible dreams could become reality. For years he cared for that car like it was a family member. Every weekend he washed it by hand. Every scratch was repaired immediately. Every maintenance schedule was followed perfectly. Then tragedy struck. Richard was diagnosed with a rare heart condition. His health declined rapidly. A few months before his death, the Lamborghini suddenly stopped working. One afternoon he parked it in the garage. The next morning it wouldn't start. Mechanics inspected it. Experts examined it. Nobody could find the problem. As Richard's health worsened, the broken car became a painful symbol of unfinished dreams. He often sat beside it in silence. Sometimes he simply stared at it for hours. Victoria never forgot those moments. She never forgot seeing her father place a hand on the car's hood while quietly fighting tears. Then, one cold autumn morning, Richard Sterling passed away. The Lamborghini remained exactly where he left it. Dead. Silent. Frozen in time. For years Victoria couldn't bring herself to touch it. Every time she opened the garage, memories came flooding back. The smell of motor oil. The sound of her father's laughter. The excitement in his eyes whenever he talked about engines. Eventually she moved the car into a private warehouse. Not because she wanted to hide it. Because she couldn't bear seeing it every day. 7 years passed. Her company grew into a billion-dollar empire. She bought houses, yachts, private jets, and investments around the world. Yet none of those things filled the empty space her father had left behind. Then one evening she found an old video on her phone. In the recording, her father stood beside the Lamborghini smiling like a child. His voice cracked with happiness as he talked about achieving his lifelong dream. Victoria cried for hours after watching it. The next morning she made a decision. She announced a public challenge. Anyone who could restore the Lamborghini to working condition would receive $2 million. News spread everywhere. Automotive experts flew in from different countries. Television crews arrived. Famous engineers accepted the challenge. One after another, they failed. Some blamed the computer system. Others blamed hidden electrical damage. Several recommended replacing entire sections of the vehicle. Months passed. Nothing worked. The Lamborghini remained silent. Then came the day that changed everything. Among hundreds of spectators stood a 49-year-old mechanic named Daniel Morales. Daniel lived a very different life from Victoria. He owned a tiny repair shop on the edge of town. Business had been struggling for years. Most customers preferred expensive dealerships. His wife had passed away 3 years earlier after battling cancer. Medical bills had consumed nearly all their savings. Now Daniel worked 12-hour days trying to support himself and help his daughter through college. Every morning he unlocked the shop before sunrise. Every evening he closed it long after dark. Life had become a cycle of survival. Still, he never complained. People respected him because he treated every customer fairly. If a repair cost $10, he charged $10. If something didn't need fixing, he said so. Honesty had never made him rich. But it allowed him to sleep peacefully. One afternoon a customer mentioned Victoria's challenge. Daniel became curious. Not because of the money. Because impossible mechanical mysteries fascinated him. The following weekend he visited the warehouse. As experts discussed complex theories, Daniel quietly observed. He walked around the Lamborghini slowly. He studied details others seemed to ignore. He looked beyond expensive technology. He focused on fundamentals. Machines, after all, still obeyed simple rules. Something had interrupted the flow of power. Something small was being overlooked. For nearly an hour he examined every accessible component. Then he noticed something unusual. A tiny section of the electrical system showed signs of previous testing. Someone had checked nearly everything around it. But one particular fuse appeared untouched. Most people would never have noticed. The part was hidden. Inexpensive. Forgettable. Daniel asked for permission to inspect it. Several experts rolled their eyes. Others laughed. They had spent months investigating advanced systems. Now a small-town mechanic wanted to examine a fuse? Victoria watched silently. Something about Daniel felt different. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He wasn't delivering grand speeches. He simply seemed curious. Permission was granted. Daniel removed the panel carefully. The warehouse grew quiet. He inspected the fuse. Then he smiled. Not a triumphant smile. A thoughtful smile. The kind mechanics make when they finally understand a problem. He looked toward Victoria. The solution, he said, might cost $9. Laughter erupted. Some people openly mocked him. Others shook their heads. One engineer called it impossible. Daniel ignored all of them. He drove to a nearby parts store. 20 minutes later he returned carrying a small package. The entire crowd watched. Victoria's heart pounded. Daniel installed the fuse. Then he sat inside the Lamborghini. The warehouse became so quiet that people could hear their own breathing. He turned the key. For a brief second, nothing happened. Then came a sound nobody expected. The dashboard illuminated. A deep mechanical growl echoed through the building. The engine roared to life. The Lamborghini shook with power. The impossible had happened. 7 years of silence vanished in an instant. Some spectators gasped. Others stared in disbelief. Several engineers looked completely stunned. Victoria froze. Tears immediately filled her eyes. The sound of that engine carried her backward through time. Suddenly she wasn't a billionaire standing in a warehouse. She was a little girl sitting beside her father. She could almost hear his laughter. Almost see his smile. Almost feel his hand on her shoulder. The engine continued rumbling. And for the first time in 7 years, a piece of her father felt alive again. Victoria stepped away from the crowd. She tried to hide her emotions. But grief has a way of revealing itself when we least expect it. Daniel noticed. He quietly shut off the engine and walked away, giving her space. That small act of kindness meant more than he realized. Most people focused on the money. Daniel focused on the person. Hours later, after reporters left and cameras disappeared, Victoria found him sitting alone near the warehouse entrance. She thanked him. Not for fixing the car. For giving her a memory she thought was lost forever. Daniel listened quietly. Then he shared his own story. He talked about losing his wife. About the nights he sat alone in an empty house. About learning that some things cannot be repaired, no matter how much effort we invest. For a moment, billionaire and mechanic became simply two human beings carrying grief. The $2 million reward was transferred the next day. News outlets celebrated Daniel as a hero. People expected him to retire. Expected him to buy luxury cars and expensive houses. Instead, Daniel did something unexpected. He paid off his daughter's college tuition. He cleared old medical debts. He repaired his struggling shop. Then he created a fund that helped families facing cancer treatment costs. Because he remembered exactly how helpless those hospital bills felt. His life improved. But he never changed. He still arrived before sunrise. Still wore oil-stained boots. Still treated customers honestly. Money had solved problems. It hadn't changed his values. Months later, Victoria visited his repair shop without reporters or publicity. She saw photographs of families his fund had helped. She saw thank you letters pinned to the wall. She saw hope being created from generosity. And she realized something important. The greatest miracle that day wasn't fixing a Lamborghini. It was proving that wisdom, humility, and kindness still exist in a world obsessed with status. Before we reach the end of this story, we have a special request. Comment below, small things can change everything. Because sometimes the smallest part holds the biggest solution. And sometimes the person everyone overlooks becomes the one who changes everything. A year later, Victoria organized a charity event. The Lamborghini stood proudly at the entrance. Guests admired its beauty. Many asked about its value. But Victoria always answered the same way. The car itself wasn't priceless. The memory attached to it was. Every time the engine started, she remembered her father. Every time she heard its roar, she remembered where she came from. And every time she saw Daniel, she remembered that true expertise doesn't always wear a suit or carry impressive titles. Sometimes it arrives in a faded work shirt carrying a $9 fuse. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with friends and family, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue sharing powerful stories about hope, kindness, perseverance, and the extraordinary impact ordinary people can have on each other's lives. In the end, the lesson was never about a Lamborghini. It was never about $2 million. It was never even about a broken machine. It was about the value of humility. The power of honesty. The importance of seeing people for who they truly are rather than what they own. A billionaire searching for a memory. A mechanic searching for a solution. Two lives connected by grief, kindness, and a forgotten $9 fuse. And somewhere beyond the noise of wealth and success, a father's dream lived once again, roaring back to life, reminding everyone who heard it that sometimes the smallest spark can awaken the most beautiful memories of all.